There's a hidden danger lurking in the Croton River. No, it's not a shark. In fact, it's not any animal at all. It's this thing. This is the hydrilla, a plant that came from all the way over in Asia. It is now destroying ecosystems in the United States. But let's take a step back and see why. This is Stuart Greenbaum. He is the chairman of the Water Control Commission for the town of Croton-on-Hudson.
That means that he is responsible for every drop of water in the town.
Hydrilla is an aquatic invasive plant. Aquatic meaning it lives underwater and by the side of water bodies, either ponds, lakes, or streams. And it is invasive because it is not natural to our environment.
That means a long time ago this plant came over on a boat, or was dumped into the water when somebody emptied their fish's aquarium.
In the Croton River, it has established itself pretty well, and if it is left untreated, it destroys wildlife habitats, fish habitats, and recreational activities are extremely affected.
This is Samantha Epstein. She is the Invasive Species Program Coordinator for the Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, an organization that tries to preserve and protect the earth.
Yeah, our concern is that it would shut down the Croton River completely. So there would be a lot of flooding. You wouldn't be able to use Silver Lake Beach anymore. The kayak launch would be shut down. The kayak rental business would be shut down too. You wouldn't be able to swim, fish, anything in the river anymore. It'll become a multi-million-dollar problem.
But how can a single plant be so bad for a body of water?
One little fragment attaching itself to a boat and falling off, or an oar, can establish itself in the mud bottom of the river and grow a brand new plant with thousands of what we call turions and tubers, which is the part of the plant that where the stem springs up from.
And why is it bad that it grows so quickly? Well, let's go to Yorktown High School to see why. One student here is doing some groundbreaking research on the dangers of the hydrilla plant.
Okay, so my name is Emily Olivier. I go to Yorktown High School in Yorktown.
She used scientific ideas to show that hydrilla is really dangerous.
What I did was I saw that hydrilla was a problem in this area, so I decided to take some out of its ecosystem and put it in these bins with water.
She used these buckets to hold the hydrilla plant for experiment in something called a mesocosm.
So a mesocosm is a small controlled environment. It's usually a plastic tupper bucket, and in my case it means that I filled it up with water, sediment, and then put some plants in it and let them grow, kind of. And it's kind of like a mini controlled world, because in the environment we can't just go out there and eliminate all the variables that we might need to, because if I was to test this grass, I would have to make sure that no one's walking over the grass, that it's protected from precipitation and rain and things like that, that the sun is equal. So with the mesocosms, we can control that, and that's why we can eliminate so many variables by using these. That's why I use them. So like animals can't get into the mesocosms.
After setting up these mini ecosystems, she then tested the hydrilla's effect on the water it was in and compared that to two other types of plants from around the area,
which are the coontail and the elodea, and I let it decompose.
As the plants decomposed, she tested the water quality levels and saw that the level of tiny solid particles in the water, like salts, was rising for the hydrilla water.
Over a series of about 2 months, I tested weekly, and with that results, I made these graphs and I found how it affected it.
From her scientific study, she can say that as the hydrilla increases the number of tiny solid particles, it may be toxic to the fish of the river. There are also many other dangers that the hydrilla poses to the ecosystem.
And also deprives food for the fish that live there, because it competes with the oxygen and light that other native plants need to live.
It can fill the entire water column, up to 20 feet deep, creating a tight web that can reduce water flow up to 85%.
And the bigger concern is that it'll spread into other tributaries along the Hudson River
Which are all of these smaller rivers that feed into the Hudson River.
and cause problems not just for the Hudson but for all of the other areas like Fishkill Creek and all of these other tributaries, and cause the same sort of problems, clogging them out. And
within 2 years, this river will probably be choked to be such a problem for recreation, for fishing, for raptors who feed off the fish. That would destroy the habitat, the environmental habitat for living things in the river. So the option of not doing anything and just, quote, observing the problem to see what happens is not an option at this point.
So what can be done about the hydrilla?
We have contracted an expert in the field. What we call an expert is a person who's called a hydrogeologist, someone who really is familiar with our well fields, with our aquifer, someone who has had experience with similar projects around the state and the country to advise us on what is appropriate and what is safe.
So it turns out that they have a few options, but not all of them will work.
you can also use benthic barriers, which are kind of like tarps that you put down on the bottom of the river and it blocks sunlight. And the reason that we wouldn't be able to use those is because they're very expensive and it would need to cover the entire bottom of the river. That also doesn't pick and choose what it kills. Everything that needs sunlight at the bottom would be killed by these tarps.
The second activity is pulling it with your bare hands, having a whole bunch of people go into the lake and the pond and start pulling at these things. That also is not going to work. They've tried that in the Croton Reservoir, and I think after several weeks all they were able to clear was probably a couple of square yards of hydrilla.
So what will work on such a bad plan to free the Croton River from the hydrilla?
The New York State, Department of Environmental Conservation is going to contract with a company highly experienced in using a chemical called fluoridone. Fluoridone it will be injected into the water, into the bottom, from the bottom of the Croton Dam, and now we are in Black Rock Park. It's going to be injected at the bottom of what they call the Black Rock Spillway. That is because it'll mix very well with the water. It'll flow down the river and it will attack the roots and what we call the parts of the plant that make it able to propagate, in other words, regenerate itself. So we know that fluoridone is safe to use in very limited strength. So the fluoridone that's going to be released over the Croton River is 2 to 4 parts per billion. Now, it's hard to imagine what that's like. It would be like taking a thimble, that you use for sewing, and spilling it into a swimming pool with 24,000 gallons of water.
When this treatment was used on the Eno River in North Carolina for the same problem, the water turned from this to this, completely free from the invasive plant. Some residents are concerned about putting a poison in their river when they get their drinking water from just below it. The town hosted a meeting where they explained their reasoning for using the chemical and answered any questions people had.
So the levels that they're putting into the water, 2 to 4 parts per billion, is so low that they won't see any impacts. It doesn't impact human health. It doesn't impact fish or other native vegetation. So it's specific to hydrilla.
The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, even after finding a solution, must continue to maintain the river and continue to treat it as part of their 5-year plan. So, yet again, science has given us ways to protect our environment, this time from the dangerous infestation of the hydrilla plant. Thanks, science!